None, please vote. It is approved. Moving on to our presentation.
Thanks for being here. Taking some time to sort of share what's happened so far with the everything that's been taking place and where we're at and what we found out. And having said that, I'll turn it over to you.
Sounds good. And again, thank you for having me here. I'll probably run through this very quickly, but feel free to jump in with questions or commentary, and I'm hopeful there'll be some discussion related to it as well. I've got to say, just to start, it's been a couple of real interesting months of learning and seeking input, and I think we've been pretty successful with the many ways we've gone about that, and we'll talk a little bit more about that here as we go through the progress we've made to date and then some of the next steps. Oh, your first instruction. So first thing we wanted to do with the facilities committee is kind of step back and say, why do we need a facility plan, and what should it look like, and what format should it consist of? And obviously you as board members know this, but here in Marshall, as in any district, and some of you have seen this language, like any district, you're really at task to keep pace with trying to keep up with all the changes and evolutions within the district, whether they're driven by the physical needs of buildings, whether it's curricular changes or programmatic changes, whether it's enrollment growth or other growth. And so over the past couple of years, you've made strides to try to address some of those things. Unfortunately, in 16 and 17, you had a couple of unsuccessful referendum efforts. And so for better or worse, those needs don't go away, and you're at task to continue to try to, as cost effectively as possible, make progress and bite away at those needs moving forward. The facility committee really defined the purpose, and it's to serve as a dynamic roadmap and really a basis for all the facility related decisions moving forward, and to serve as a high level summary of the needs and associated priorities. Couple of takeaways there. One, it's a dynamic plan, which means, you know, even what you'll see tonight is probably outdated as of maybe a half a day or so. It needs to be considered a dynamic plan because just like the needs and things happening in the district, it's constantly changing and evolving. And so we talked with the facilities committee about how often do we need to revisit certain things? How often do we need to discuss, not only as a committee, but as a full school board, how things need to be structured, what priorities are shifting as things evolve and continue. So those are all just parts and pieces of it. I think the other takeaway for this slide is, for better or worse, as a public school district, inevitably when you look at a long-range facility plan, it's going to have to come with priorities because funding is certainly limited. That doesn't mean that one priority or need is more important than the other, but some may be more urgent, some may be more prevalent from what we're hearing in the community, and ultimately those priorities have to be made. Wanted to review the timeline a little bit, and as we discussed initially, really been a couple of months worth of fact-finding and information gathering. We'll talk a little bit about the different ways we sought input in different sources, but as you can see, everything shaded in the gray are items that have really been completed to date, and those are really focused on initial surveys and initial input sessions and work sessions with various stakeholder groups to seek input and initial perceptions. We've had many meetings with the facilities committee along the way to kind of bounce ideas back and forth, to identify themes, ultimately to start looking at priorities and what you'll see in a little bit kind of makes up what they're recommending be considered as your long-range facility plan, or at least the components within that. So to talk a little bit more about the input that we received. Early on, I had a couple of days worth of one-on-one, two-on-one, three-on-one meetings with various stakeholders from the community. Some were parents, some were business folks, some were folks from the college. Just a very widespread kind of cross-section. And really what that did was enable me to start learning about Marshall and initial perceptions. Whether those are reality or not is kind of irrelevant, because if they are perceptions that are out there, that really is kind of establishing the current reality, and it'll start to unfold when we talk about different challenges and opportunities that we're going to have to deal with moving forward. We conducted a work session with district admin and went through a similar set of questions to try to get their perspectives, more from an insider viewpoint. Did the same thing with you guys as school board members, and walked through, and we wanted to hear and learn your perceptions and perspectives on things. We had a number of community meetings, input sessions, and we would have loved to have 3 or 4 times as many folks attend those. Unfortunately, that's kind of how it goes, but we wanted the opportunity to at least hear input and have some dialogue with people firsthand. Did an online district staff survey. I don't know if you recall how many folks responded to that, but
I think there were 73 that completed the survey.
Okay, and then we did a staff and online survey for kind of parents or family survey, again, to try to capture those perspectives. Any questions on that? Keep plugging. So the next few slides are really what we've worked to put together as kind of common themes or observations based on pages and pages of notes and survey responses from all of those different input givers. As you can see, what positive things should be leveraged or communicated moving forward. Generally, we heard time and time again that the district trust and transparency is generally good. That's a great thing to hear from the community at large and from other stakeholders. There's a general feeling that is good. Definitely something that should be leveraged and communicated is all the growth and the diversity within the community. Staff and students and achievements from that perspective was brought up many times as something that we need to really leverage and include. And part of that, I guess, as Minnesotans, we may be a little more humble, and we don't oftentimes brag or boast about some of the accolades, but whether it's athletics or activities or academics, you've got to be proud of some of the things that are being accomplished and really leverage those things. Partnerships within the community, and then the school board and administration is generally liked and respected as well, which is a bonus for you guys. What challenges do we need to try to at least overcome or address or consider to clarify? The egg climate was brought up in survey responses and in those input sessions many times, and that's something that if and as we move forward, we're really going to have to be mindful of as we're communicating and messaging the needs. The arena issue and perceptions associated with that, and how it was paid for originally, and who owns it. A lot of these items are going to be pretty easily clarified, but I think we just need to be at task to do that moving forward. Changing demographics we mentioned. Private and parochial schools within the community. Obviously that's a big part of Marshall, and I think just being mindful about how those schools feed your district and how you've got partnerships with those folks. We're going to need to be strategic about that. Schwann's sale, the recent sale, and the uncertainty around that, I think, is something that we heard many times, and we're just going to have to provide clarity so that folks understand. And some community members that may publicly resist supporting any future potential referendum. Whether that's due to the fact you've had a couple that have been unsuccessful, or folks that are a little reluctant to stick their nose out, we can respect that. We just need to work as a district to inform everybody about your needs as a district and see where it goes from there. High priorities. We asked all of these different groups what should be considered high priorities, and these three items came back resoundingly as the highest priority items. Early childhood programming in space, safety and security improvements, and looking at a solution for Westside Elementary. Without a doubt, those three were just multiple times versus other items. And what does the district need to do better next time if you do choose to go to the voters for approval? We heard be more transparent and communicate better, engage all groups within the community, try to improve the outreach and engagement to those groups. Again, really fighting apathy, as many districts have to in this day and age. Trying to phase the work and look at a scope that might be more palatable from a tax impact or tax tolerance standpoint is something that was mentioned in the survey results. And then trying to demonstrate or show the poor conditions or the need for space and what can be gained if changes are to be made was something that was brought up several times. So when the facilities committee looked at components of your long-range plan here in Marshall, we really identified kind of four primary categories. You've got your ongoing facility-related needs, and if you know, just based on conversations, many of you are aware, those are the needs that are typically taken care of on a regular basis, on an annual basis, leveraging LTFM funding or any ongoing funding mechanism like that. Then we've got priority one needs, which have it's really defined as those items that need to be addressed immediately or within the next 1 to 3 years. The facility committee sees needing to review those at a minimum on an annual basis to verify priorities, to make sure things are still applicable or appropriate. Priority two are needs that have been identified, again, no less important, but they may be a little less urgent, or funding might be a little more challenging. So those are currently defined as needs that need to be addressed or attempted to be addressed in the next 3 to 6 years, or as funding allows. We talked about this needing to be a dynamic plan. Earlier this year, you were awarded some security grant money. Well, that's a perfect example of how something may shift within the plan based on funding becoming allowed or available. So priority three items are items that are defined right now as they're on the radar as a need. There's no readily available funding mechanism, and they may be items that need to be evaluated on a regular basis and kind of further defined as they get closer to the time when they need to be considered for implementation. Any questions on those definitions?
No, I just think one of the things from a committee standpoint, we spent a lot of time talking about the different priorities. And I think one of the things we really wanted to drive home was the fact that you pointed out, Pat, that something could change and something could move at any point from priority three to priority one, whether it be the opportunity for funding or if there's a change in a status or something, or you know, an opportunity that presents itself. So I think we spent a lot of time talking about, you know, 1, 2, and 3. They're all important, but how can we get to them in a timely manner? And so having to kind of categorize them was something we talked about doing, hence the reason you see the three.
Yeah, and I think you're exactly right. You may have a donor pop up or a partnership with a business in town pop up and immediately be able to address a priority 2 or 3 item, and certainly that's something you want to take advantage of if you can. But so needs that have been identified currently within the plan. This slide really provides a little bit of a summary of those priority 1 needs. As you can see, ongoing infrastructure and maintenance needs we talked about. Typical funding is LTFM or capital reserves or potential other levy sources on an annual basis. A replacement for Westside Elementary has been identified as a priority 1, and you can see an associated budget there. District-wide safety and security, many different ways to fund safety and security improvements. likely in your case, based on the grant money received, it's probably a combination of 2 or 3 different buckets to get you there and to make sure all of your buildings are addressed appropriately. An early childhood space, which was identified as a high priority there as well. Priority 2 needs are broken down in a couple of different ways. Additional core classroom space at the middle school, exploratory classrooms to better serve some of the programs at the middle school level, additional core space at the high school, and then career and tech space at the high school level. And you can see the potential funding sources at least identified at that time. Those are a perfect example of what needs to be kind of reviewed and looked at on an annual basis as things shift in priority. Priority 3, those items that aren't quite quantified yet, but you know they're on your radar, and as they get closer, we'll take a look. Maytech space, I think you are in the process of, or you recently kind of renewed things there, so you're set up with that space for a while. Activity and athletic improvements, maintenance or storage space, a swimming pool space, and how best to capitalize on that square footage within the building. And then child care center and if and how to accommodate that in the future at some point. So once we went through all of the priorities, one of the next steps for the facility committee was really to talk about and debate and discuss priorities and recommended timing. Plan components and priorities have really been based on a few different things, and I've probably mentioned these while I've been discussing it, but I wanted to sum it up for you. Obviously, all the community input and feedback played a big part in putting things together, not only from identifying those needs, but looking at it from a priority standpoint. The overall costs and associated tax impacts, again, as a district, the dollars have to play into the equation from a priority standpoint. Capital cost avoidance, looking at replacement of West Side Elementary. Obviously, there are a lot of needs there, not only from a physical standpoint, but from a programmatic and space standpoint. And when past referendum efforts have happened, you've looked at those numbers. We've looked at those numbers now, and there's a significant amount of capital cost that can be avoided if you look at replacing that facility in the future. And the ability to coordinate some of that safety and security work with the recent grant funding we talked about. Other part of the recommendation, I guess, in order to allow adequate time to try to pull things together, refine numbers and finalize funding sources, they're recommending seeking voter approval for just the priority 1 items as soon as May of 2019. So next steps, and this will go back to kind of the second half of the initial timeline. As you can see tonight, this is really reviewing the recommendations with you, the board. I think some of the next steps, not to read through these line item by line item, really to allow you as a board to take these and digest, come back with you over the course of December, trying to get your thoughts on things. And if May of 19 is a target date, then I think one of the things that has to happen is to enable administration or the facilities committee as a whole to really continue forward progress in pulling things together, refining and finalizing a scope, and then jumping into the kind of the approvals process with formal approvals here at the board level, as well as all of the formal review and comment approvals and things that have to happen at the state level. And moving forward, you can see then it would be all spring of really communicating and dissemination of information.
What's a brush fire survey?
Yeah, I was going to ask the same.
Good question. I think we talked about it a couple facility committee meetings ago. Not sure where the group landed or where you would be at it, but public opinion survey. So once things are finalized, one of the things you can consider is to go test concepts or test messaging or tax tolerance with the community. You've had surveys in the past, whether you choose to do that or not. That's kind of why it's listed here as a potential.
What would the purpose of that be after this decision was made? We've already had all this input. Why would we go back with another survey?
I think what you could do with that survey is determine how best to communicate. And as a district, you're bound not to advocate, but you've just got to get information out there. And
Well,
so,
the survey could focus on how would you like us to communicate?
yes, yes. And do we talk about, what's an example? The cost, for instance, do we talk about the cost from a total dollar amount, or from a monthly tax impact standpoint, or from an annual tax impact standpoint? How best do people receive information and want to hear things? Does that make sense? So I kind of rambled through a lot of information here very quickly, but there's literally a book worth of detail and information behind it. I think one of the things that was very satisfying going through this is it was great to be able to take a lot of time and effort to seek input through all the different channels, and then to work with the committee to try to pull it together and look for themes and
Question,
observations.
with reference to the time frame you have here, is it realistic? Is our target date with reference to the tasks in front of us yet for a vote on May 14th? Is that realistic for us?
In my opinion, yes, definitely. Yeah, so as a school district, and we went through this at the committee, there are really 5 times during the year now that you are able to go to the voters. February, April, May, August, and November. February and April are too quick, in my opinion. May gives you some comfort in there, plenty of time here to really refine and fine-tune things before you have to start worrying about hitting some of the statutory dates. So it feels better from a...
And with May, we're not competing with a general election date, right?
You aren't. The other thing that we talked about at the committee level, just from a design and construction standpoint, if you were successful in May, it sets yourself up in such a way where you're not going to miss another full school year implementing some of the solutions. That's one of the difficulties about a November vote. And next year is an off year regardless. So.
You've really done a nice exhaustive piece of this
Thanks. Yeah,
system
feels good.
analytically.
Were you able to talk to many people that voted no in the past two referendums, and the reason was cost mostly, or?
You know, I think anecdotally, I think cost was a huge factor. I think I heard time and time and again, don't try to bite it all off. Try to prioritize and make something palatable. A lot of folks out there that still consider your high school the new high school. That was a struggle last time as well. Yeah.
The misperceptions about the Red Baron Arena, that's
Yep.
not a school district facility. I mean,
Correct.
It's amazing how many times that comes up. You know, architects designed it so that it looked and blended in with the facilities that were there, but it's a City of Marshall facility.
Because
So,
it's at the high school campus as
yeah,
well.
right.
We did get lots of input from the online surveys that people would write in. I mean, we had hundreds of comments that we broke down and looked at and categorized them.
I think the other thing that was nice about what Pat did is, you know, we had all the financial information and the facilities reviews done, you know, before. I think Pat came in and validated a lot of what we had and gave it, you know, fresh set of eyes to know that what we do have is still valid information. And he updated, I think, costs on some of those things that you see here. He did talk about the timeline, and that, I think if we push out much farther beyond May, you get into that August, November timeline, you missed a whole nother season, and now this project becomes, 4 years down the road.
And I don't know about the
Problem
rest
doesn't
of
go
you,
away.
but I'm getting questions on when are you gonna bring it to vote?
Yeah,
Are you guys getting the same?
Absolutely.
People are asking me, when are you gonna bring it to vote?
the other thing that I really liked is, you asked the question, Matt, about those that said no, and I think the surveys and the interviews that were done was a really good cross-section of people, because I think we were intentional about finding people that had alternative ideas or, were a definite no, and we wanted to find out why and what drove some of those things. So I think we had a good cross-representation, especially on the interviews that you did. And
Yeah, that was important to getting an authentic feel for things, absolutely.
Main reason for looking at just the priority one needs primarily due to cost?
Yeah. Yep. And cost and feedback, resounding feedback.
Cost-wise, is this, doesn't look like a lot different on the number side than what we talked about 2 years ago, does it, for anybody?
Well, I think, and I know Pat and others have a lot of work left to do to, this information is presented as sort of, I would say, budget estimates. So really honing in on, excuse me, the specific amounts for those things. I like to believe, and Pat, you can correct me, that you're probably generous with your budgeting or conservative, whatever word you want to look at. But I think last time it was 38.9 million? So, are we going to be a lot less than that? Probably not. But when you build or when you propose to build an 82,000 square foot building at whatever dollar figure is used in the industry per square foot, that's going to be the biggest chunk, just like it was before. That elementary was over 50% or half of the total bond amount. So I think by prioritizing these, what I like about it is the number of people that comment about West Side is overwhelming. And at least in the communications that we get or I get, and many of you do as well. Jeff commented about the survey responses and just the same message there. So that has really risen up or continued to be a main priority, hence why it's in priority one. If there's a downside to that, it is that replacing a building costs money.
Well, and if you look at costing in, Aaron, each year we wait, the more it's gonna cost. You look back 2 years ago, I don't know how much more the cost is, but the cost is greater than what it was 2 years ago.
I think it was 21.4 million 2 years ago or 3 years ago
3 years ago, that was the number.
for the same building.
Not adding on to the high school, and we're not putting physical structures on the outside of Parkside.
Reutilizing the space if we get the new 2 through 4 elementary building, which is great use of the space at Parkside. Way back when, we talked about it needing to be a primary center with preschool as well. A long time ago when we were talking about selling Parkside, remember that? So it's really, that'll really fit the needs of early childhood and for the parents of young children.
Plus
Be a
we're
primary,
utilizing,
truly be a primary center.
plus we're utilizing all this space.
Yes, this space becomes
Right.
available.
One of the really nice things about this, where we're at right now, is it's maybe the first time in a long time where we've tried to, we have a complete list. When you look at priority 1, priority 2, priority 3, everything is in there. And we talk about safety and security. That's a part of a separate discussion as what we might want to do at the high school in the future with career and technical education programming, which we also talk about replacing the track out here as a separate discussion. Well, now they're all being brought together in a truly a long-range facilities plan, and I think that will serve us well. Facilities Committee members, and you've already chimed in, but anything else throughout the discussions, the meetings, the learning, that the homework that you had to do, all the reading, anything else that you want to share that you think is important?
I think it's good. I would hope that when people read about this in a newspaper or they see it on TV, that they feel free to call and ask questions. We can't answer them if we don't have the questions. So please communicate with us.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that we heard was communicate, and, you know, we struggled with this because we have to draw a line on what we can and can't do as board members, advocating for or against. But as Pat said, I think we can push the envelope a little bit more on the advocating and informing. So if there are avenues for sharing the message that we're missing, we want people to let us know so that we can get in front of them. We certainly provide a lot of opportunities, but obviously there could be more, and anything we could do to share the need, we're certainly not opposed to doing that.
We'd be
We
happy.
can advocate for kids, and this is for kids.
And we as a board will answer any question that anybody asks. If we don't know the answer, we'll find out and get back to them.
And I look back to when I was in the principalship. Many people, when they were looking to move here for their profession, one of the first things they did is they came in and interviewed me about what's your school like when they were making that decision. And I think Amran is an example, you know, her getting the full ride at Columbia. I mean, that's an example for parents of high school kids who are coming in, what kind of program you got. This young lady got a full ride at Columbia.
She can buy dinner at MSBA this year then.
But it's the pride we have in our schools. You know, I've always been proud to talk to parents about the opportunities we have for kids in this town.
You know, and we've talked a lot about it, and Pat shared that one of the things in terms of the positive messages or themes that came out was the growth in the community. The number of comments I read about that, business growth and just a population. I think I've shared before that I believe Marshall and maybe Lind are the only two communities in Lyon County whose population has increased, and that's a positive thing. So continuing to try to make our community as attractive as we can to new families, new people who want to live here, and the school district and the quality of that, Bill, like you said, is definitely a part of that, absolutely. We still get calls for tours when employers are recruiting candidates for positions. Our principals have done a great job of saying, yep, I'll meet you on a Saturday and show you around. Parents and families do take a look at that, and we want to continue to be a part of that growth and do whatever we can in the community, no doubt. I know all of you know that already, but.
I did a little bit of reading there was a new study that came out from the Carlson School of Business about how Minnesota keeps the Fortune 500 companies in Minnesota. And it's a triad of items, but one of the big reasons is our public education system. And if you don't have a good public education system in your area, you're not going to draw businesses.
An example is that Minnesota is number one in the nation in ACT scores.
Yep, have been for a number of years.
Yep.
Any other comments, board members? Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Pat, thank you very much.
Yep. I'll adjourn this meeting and we'll re-commission at 6:01.